where do you see the referendum and the Russian annexation in terms of international law? And
well, let's start off with the principle of self-determination. That's one of the fundamental principles of the United Nations. But to exercise self-determination, a referendum has to be fair. It has to be available to everybody, and there can be no pressures put on people to vote. So right off the bat, Russia has a problem because the areas in which these referendums are being held are in conflict. And I got a dog that's just going absolutely crazy. I mean, there's not much I can do about it because somebody's at the door. But the half the population, not half, but a large part of the population has fled. I mean, many of the Ukrainian residents of these territories aren't there. They fled to other locations, either deeper into Ukraine or into Europe, and they weren't able to participate. So on the surface, one can make the claim that these referendums did not meet international standards and therefore weren't legitimate. But then there's always the other side of the coin. The Russians, for 8 years, watched while the Russian population of Donbass was shelled and subjected to horrific deprivations at the hand of the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians have positioned themselves to embrace a version of virulent ultranationalism that views the Russians as subhumans. They're orcs. And in this light, Russia cannot tolerate any continuation of a system that allows this kind of abuse to be targeted on the Russian people. And so Russia held referendum that took into account the will of the Russian people. And I think that will was well represented. I think that the Russian people want the outcome. And frankly speaking, the Ukrainian people lost the right to participate. I'm sorry, Ukraine, but when you endorse the ideology of Stepan Bandera, you cease to be relevant in a modern discussion. When you support white supremacy to the point that you view Russians as subhumans, you don't get to participate in this anymore. And that's where the Ukrainian government is. And that's where the Ukrainian people are. And I know that's a broad brush. People are going, you can't paint all Ukrainians the same. Yes, I can, and I just did. Because you know what, Ukraine, for 8 years, you were silent. If you're one of these Ukrainians who say, that's not me, then where were you while 8 years you shelled Donbass? Where were you? Where were you when the Russians voted, or when the Ukrainian parliament elevated Stepan Bandera to national hero status? Where were you while the Azov Battalion and the Adar Battalion, the Krakens and the Safaris and all these other ultranationalist neo-Nazi units? And God, there's no neo-Nazi issue in Iran. I mean, in Ukraine, what are you talking about? I don't know. Why don't we refer to the United States Congress and the amendments that were put on defense appropriations from 2015 onwards, which said no taxpayer money could go to the Azov Battalion because it's a white supremacist neo-Nazi unit, and it's not the only one. They identified others as well. We know there's a Nazi problem in Ukraine. We did nothing about it. And the Ukrainians also did nothing about it. They allowed it to have people saying, well, it's a minority. They're a political minority. No, there might be a political minority, but they're a violent majority. They used violence to shoehorn themselves into positions of power. And you, the people of Ukraine, did nothing. So you lost the right to participate in a referendum. Tough luck. That's what happens when you lose wars. Tough luck. Now, international law, maybe they have a case. But reality, those territories are now constitutionally part of Russia, and there ain't nothing going to happen in the world that's going to change that.